Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to the first edition of a brand new review series where I'll be talking about albums from some of my favourite jazz artists and bands, and I'll also be covering certain musicians' entire back catalogue of albums, and I'll also be talking about some rare and hidden gems that some people may not be aware of. And I thought, what better way to kick off this brand new review series by talking about the latest album from none other than the legendary guitarist himself, Pat Metheny, and the latest album that has just come out earlier this year, back in February, is of course From This Place. Now, From This Place marks the first time in over 6 years that Pat has released any new material, and the last time that he released any new material was back in 2014 with his unity group called Kin. Now, that's not to say that Pat hasn't been busy, because over the course of 6 years he has released the Unity Sessions, which was a double album of the same name as the DVD. He also collaborated with former PMG bandmate Cuong in an album called Cuong Trio Meets Pat Metheny, but that was more of Cuong show and Pat was the special guest, and he's credited on some tracks that he co-composed. And also he did a sideman project with young saxophonist Logan Richardson called Shift. But other than that, albums from Pat himself have largely been absent, which is a little bit surprising because Pat Metheny throughout most of his career has always been consistent with releasing new music, whether it's his group, the PMG, aka the Pat Metheny Group, or a trio project, or a solo guitar album, or one of his crazy orchestrion projects. But this has been the longest time that Pat has gone without any new material. But that's not to say that Pat Metheny hasn't been busy on the live scene. And over the course of the last 4 years, Pat has been touring under a title called An Evening with Pat Metheny. So what that means is Pat can pick whoever he wants to play with him live, and they cover all sorts of material across his entire career. So Pat at the moment has 2 bands: Side Eye with James Francis and Marcus Gilmore, and the other band he has, a quartet with pianist Gwilym Simcock, bassist Linda Mahan-O, and longtime collaborator drummer Antonio Sanchez. And the focus of the quartet has been mainly to go out live and play all of the older material from Pat's career. So that could be either the entire album of Bright Side's life, it could be PMG material, or it could be material that has never been played live or has never been recorded. And this quartet has been Pat's working band for well over 4 years. And when he went on tour with Ron Carter, legendary jazz bassist, Ron Carter explained to Pat that when I was in the Miles Davis Quintet, we played the same set list for over 5 years, so when it was time to record the new material, we would apply our style to the music and then go out and play live. And that's exactly what Pat has done with this band. So he's been covering all of his older material, as I said already, so when it was time to go in the studio and record the new material, this quartet would play that and record it in their own style with their own identity. Now this album right here, From This Place, is a little bit different to past Pat Metheny recordings. This album has more of a orchestral feel to it. Now, the last time he's done something of this scale was back in 1992, which was of course his classic Secret Story recording, and also he did the soundtrack for Map of the World. But this is the first time with a working band he's had the orchestra play a big part of the material. So this album, a lot of people say that this is the greatest Pat Metheny recording ever made. I'm not too sure whether it's the greatest of all time or the greatest Pat Metheny recording ever. Time will tell, but it's a great album, and we've got 10 tracks: America Undefined, Wide and Far, You Are, Same River, Pathmaker, The Past in Us, Everything Explained, From This Place, 66, and a bonus track called Love May Take a While. So as you can see here, there is the track listing right there. There we go, there we go, there's the track listing right there. And it's got a very somber mood to it, as you can tell by the clouds here. So here is Pat with all the gear, his guitars there, and we have some guest musicians on this album. We've got Gregoire Maret on harmonica, who played with PMG back on the Way Up album. We've got Luis Conte on percussion, who also guested on a PMG recording called We Live Here. And we've got a lovely singer named Meshell Ndegeocello, and we also got the Hollywood Studio Symphony Orchestra conducted by Joel McNeely, and also a couple of tracks are arranged by Pat Metheny and Gwilym Simcock, and another one arranged by Pat and Linda Mayhan-O, and orchestral arrangements are arranged by Gil Goldstein and Alan Broadbent, and also additional orchestral arrangements by Pat himself, and all compositions are written and composed by Pat himself. And having just listened to this album, it's a great album, as you'd expect from a guy like Pat. And there's the band, there's the orchestra, there's Antonio Sanchez, Linda Mayhan-O, and Gwilym Simcock. Now, I have read a couple of reviews about this band, and a lot of people said that it was a great show and Gwilym Simcock was great when you can hear him. Now, I went to see the quartet back in November 2017 at the London EFG Jazz Festival with my dad, and it was a great gig, absolutely fantastic. 3 hours straight, no break, and as you'd expect, Pat always gives you your money's worth. And yeah, I can see what people would mean, that no one could hear Gwilym Simcock, but he plays absolutely brilliant on this album. And Gwilym Simcock's got a long history. You know, he's played with Bill Bruford Earthworks, he's played with Tim Garland's Lighthouse Trio, and some of his best playing and his best work was with The Impossible Gentleman, with Steve Swallow, Mike Walker, and former PMG bassist Steve Rodby, and legendary drummer Adam Nussbaum. So I highly recommend checking that out. And Linda Mayhan-O plays absolutely fantastic on this album. Lots of great bass playing and lots of bass soloing from the lovely Linda Mayhan-O. And you know, Pat's always had fantastic bass players: Steve Rodby, Jaco Pastorius, Dave Holland, Charlie Hayden, you name it, Larry Grenadier, Christian McBride. You know, he's played with all of the great bass players, and she serves as a welcome addition to this band and to this album. And Antonio Sanchez, who's been with Pat since Speaking of Now, back in 2002, so he's coming into nearly playing with Pat for almost 20 years now, and he plays very good on this album, as you'd expect, but he's a little bit more, I wouldn't say restrained, he's a little bit more laid back on this album. But that's not to say he doesn't get a little bit of his chops in. You know, there's some great drumming from Antonio Sanchez. And having listened to this album a number of times now, it's got a very PMG feel to it, which is hard to avoid when you've got a piano in Pat's band, because the piano is such a big part of the Pat Metheny sound and the music, so it's no surprise that it would sound very similar to his old band, the Pat Metheny Group. And As I said, Gwilym Simcock plays absolutely amazing, and he matches up very well with Pat Metheny, I would say. So the first track is America Undefined, which is 13 minutes long, kind of a little bit of an epic, and it's very similar to the title track from the Unity group, King. And the way it starts, it's very slow with bowed bass, and it goes into like this full-on PMG sort of mode. And then the second half of this track, it's very powerful and very heavy orchestral. I mean, it sounds absolutely amazing, and I have no doubt when this does get played live, it's going to sound absolutely incredible. The next track is Wide and Far. This is one of my favourite tracks on this album. It's very fast, lots of great bass playing, lots of great piano playing, and I love the way this track slowly wraps up towards the end, and Linda just goes really to town on the acoustic bass, and it reminds me of, quite ironically, Pat Metheny Group Quartet, Language of Time, where Steve Rodby gets to just have a little bit of a bass solo moment at the end, and it's kind of like this with Linda, and it's a really good track, and this is one of my favourites. And the next track we got here is You Are. Now this one's kind of like a very, how should I put it, like a haunting ballad. It starts off with just quiet piano playing, solo wise, and it just builds and builds and builds until the rest of the guys join in, and there's a little bit of vocals on here. I'm not really too sure who's doing vocals here. It could be Linda O. I'm not too sure. There's no one else apart from one. Is there anyone else who plays or sings on this as vocals? So I would imagine it's probably Linda O. So it's another great track. You Are. Love that track. Now this track, Same River, 6 minutes long, but boy oh boy, powerful and really packs a punch. It starts off with Linda on bass, and then the rest of the guys join in. Great piano playing from Gwilym Simcock, and then kind of mirrors PMG what they're used to do, and then Pat just comes in on guitar synth, and I've got to tell you, when I first heard that track, the guitar synth, it brought a tear to my eye. It just was so good, and it was just like, it's been a long time, but it's great to have you back. And he really goes to town here, and it's unbelievable guitar synth solo, probably the best solo on this album, and probably my favourite track of the entire album. It's really, really good. And the next track is Pathmaker. Pathmaker at the beginning sounds very similar to Watercolours, Lakes. It's very, very similar to that in terms of the guitar, piano, harmony, and again another great track, love it. And got another ballad here, The Past in Us. I read a comment on YouTube about this track that the piano playing at the beginning with the orchestra, it sounds like Danny Elfman from Batman 89 soundtrack, where Bruce Wayne goes to the spot at Crime Alley where his parents were murdered, and I can kind of hear the similarities to that piece. And very, very beautiful, great acoustic guitar playing, and beautiful harmonica playing from Gregoire Maret, and it's really similar to the late great Toots Tilminson, who passed away many years ago, and it's almost like the ghost of Toots Tilminson returned and played with Pat, because he did play on Secret Story many years ago on Always and Forever, and it's very, very similar to that track, and it's very, very beautiful. And one thing about Pat, nobody can write a ballad quite like him, and it's really, really good. Another favourite track of mine. Everything Explained, fast, great interplay with Gwilym Simcock and Antonio Sanchez, with the whole piano drums locking into each other, so that was quite good. I really enjoyed that a lot. And another track here, From This Place. Now this is, to my knowledge, the first time that Pat has wrote a vocal track with actual words. I know he did a track called This Is Not America with the legendary David Bowie, but that was probably more David Bowie's thing than Pat's thing, but they did co-write it together. But to my knowledge, this is the first time that Pat's written a track that actually has words, like proper vocal track. And this track, of course, features the lovely Meshell Ndegeocello, and very, very peaceful, very, very sombre. It's got a very sombre feel to it, and I like it. It's really nice, and I'm wondering how they're going to play that live. Maybe she might guest with him on the tour for one show, or maybe he might play it as an instrumental. Very hard to say, but we shall see. Next track we got here is 66. Now to me, this sounds like Last Train Home 2.0. With the whole brushes. Yeah, it sounds like that, and lots of great bass playing from Linda O. And I have to say, all due respect to Pat and everybody else, Linda Mahan O really shines on this album a lot. Lots of great bass playing, lots of great bass work and solos. She really takes charge on this, and as I said, Pat's always had a great thing for bass players, and Linda O doesn't disappoint here. She really, really owns this album, and this is one track, which is this one I'm talking about here, 66. There's 2 bass solos, so that's a nice treat, and very reminiscent of the Pat Metheny Group's classic Last Train Home track. So yeah, this is really good. And the last track is Love May Take a While, which is a bonus track, and it's very old fashioned 60s sort of orchestral, like what you'd hear in the movies, and it's a very peaceful track, very, very slow, and it's definitely sounds like a movie. I mean, this entire album, when you listen to it, it does sound like it could have been for a soundtrack for a movie, because it's got a very large cinematic scope to it. It's got a very big cinematic scale to the music, and this is a very different album to what Pat has done in the past, and that's one thing I like about Pat. He never repeats himself. He's always challenging himself, and he's always coming up with new things all the time. And obviously he's got his trademark sound. When you hear him, you know straight away who it is. And if you listen to one Pat album and you listen to all of them, they don't all sound the same. They all sound different, and that's what I like about him. So where does this album rank for me? For me, I would probably say this is album of the year, without a doubt, because it's been like over 6 years since we had any new material, and it was definitely worth the wait. And I'm hoping he keeps this band going, because I like this band. The quartet, piano, bass, drums, guitar. It's kind of nice. It's like a throwback to when Pat first started back in the 70s. So I'd like to see him keep this band going, and this, I would say, is album of the year, hands down. There's been a lot of great albums this year, but this for me is the best album of 2020 by far. So I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you think of this album, From This Place? Do you think it's one of Pat's best, or are you like some people who say this is probably the greatest Pat Metheny album ever made? Do you have any favourite tracks on this album? Tracks like Wide and Far, America Undefined, any of those tracks you like? Or is there tracks on there that may not have appealed to you? Where do you rank this in 2020? Would you put this as album of the year or one of the best albums of the year? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will be back next time for another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. So until then, take care everybody, and stay safe.